This is going to be your video introducing you to function notation and composition of functions. We will do plenty of practice next class. I just wanted you to have seen a little bit before so you can jump right in there and you can start working with your classmates after I answer any questions. So let's start with this question. If y equals 3x squared plus 7, what is the value of y when x equals -1? So what we would do as a little bit of review, we're going to say, I'm telling you what the equation is that you're working with, and I'm giving you the value of x equal to -1. So we will take that equation, y equals 3, taking that value for x, that -1, substituting in, and then simplifying and seeing what we get. So y equals 3. Remember when you're squaring a -1, -1 times -1 is 1. So we'll just get a 1 when we square that. Plus 7 equals 3 plus 7. So we get a 10. Okay. So this is option 1. This is one way to ask the question. And then another way to ask the exact same question, which I'm going to call option 2, which is introducing you to this idea of function notation. So I'm instead going to say if f of x equals 3x squared plus 7. So I'm still giving you an equation here, right? And I'm indicating to you that what we're dealing with here is a function. And as we talked about last class, that means for any input, we are only going to get one output, okay? So that's the only difference here. We could, if you want to, and I'll talk about this more in class, if you're looking at something and you want to call that y, you can, okay? That's writing that as f of x equals versus y equals, that's going to be equivalent. But I do want you to get used to just seeing f of x. You'll see this on the next page. We can write it of g of x, h of x, okay? These are just all ways to indicate to you that what you're dealing with there is a function, okay? So if I'm saying if f of x equals 3x squared plus 7, then another way to write what I talked about as option 1 above is find f of -1, okay? So we're going to be practicing with this notation a lot and this as well, but next class, I really want you to get comfortable, find f of -1. So if I'm asking you to do that, find f of -1, for example, I will give you the function. I'm not going to ask you this without supplying this, right? So you need to know the function that you're working with for this question. So it's going to be the same deal. F of -1, notice from here, what I substituted in for x in here was a -1. So all I'm going to do is, if I want to find f of -1, I'm going to take that function f of x and substitute just like that other example. I won't bore you and go through it, but same deal algebraically. This, and then we're going to maybe get a 10, okay? So one reason I like that function notation is it's just a more succinct way to write that question, okay? Among other things, this function notation is something you want to feel comfortable reading, but really what I want to reinforce is if you feel comfortable with option 1, and again, I'm going to be saying this a lot at the beginning of the course this year, there are things that I'm going to expect to be review like this option 1. If anything you see doesn't feel like review or you want to practice more, let me know. But assuming you were relatively comfortable with option 1, then what I want you to understand is option 2 is the same thing. The skill here is you're just learning to read that, okay? So let's just look at an example here. If f of x, and again, I will formally introduce this with notes next class, but this reads as f of x, if I'm reading that aloud, and I read this aloud as g of x, okay? If f of x equals 3x squared minus 7, did I just do the same thing? Plus 7 minus 7. And g of x equals -2x plus 3.3, find, and I gave you 3 things I want you to find, okay? So let's start. I want you to find A on your own and submit that answer. Okay, starting this first problem, f of 2 equals, and so I'm just substituting in like we did before in that other example, right? So f of whatever's in here, if you're being asked to evaluate, you're just substituting that value in for x in this case. So I'm going to put a 2 in, okay? So I get 3 times 2 squared is 4 minus 7, 12 minus 7, so I get a 5 here. All right, next one. Now, only difference is, and again, same deal as I said on that last slide, if I'm going to ask you for f of 2 or g of 1 or whatever we're talking about, I'm going to give you those functions, right? So now I just need to decide I'm using this g of x function because I'm asking you for g of 1, okay? So g of 1 equals negative 2 times whatever I put in those parentheses plus 3.3. And the whatever I put in those parentheses in this context, is a 1, right? So I'm substituting in equals negative 2 times 1 plus 3.3. And so we're going to get a 1.3. All right. And then the last one here, I'm just going to erase a little to give myself some room. This is what I referenced as a composition of functions. So you're noticing that f of 1, this function is within the g of x function. Okay, so let's look at how to do that. I will not pause the video and ask you to do this on your own. We'll just do this one together. But you're just going to work innermost parentheses. So do you know how to find f of 1? Okay, if your instinct, if you're not sure yet, we'll keep practicing it, but f of 1, I'm going to find that function f of x. So I'm just going to deal with that first, okay? I'm ignoring the g of whatever at this point. So 3 times blank squared minus 7. The blank, I'm filling in with a 1, right? That 1 here. So 3 times 1 squared, 3 times 1 minus 7. And so I'm going to get a negative 4. Now, I determined just now that f of 1 equals negative 4. So now I'm just doing g of whatever's equivalent to negative 4 there. G of, and let me erase over here, g of negative 4. Okay. So we'll finish this up. So now I'm taking my g of x function, which was given to you. I'm always going to give that to you. Plus 3.3. And we figured out that was negative 4. So now I have 8 plus 3.3. So I'm going to have an 11.3. Okay. Those are the basics we need to start next class. When you come in or when we meet, I'm going to have you ask any questions you have about this, and then we're just going to jump into practicing. And I think sometimes the best way to answer questions once you've gotten any initial things out of the way is just to practice a little bit and see what comes up. So looking forward to seeing you all.